Fellas, we're finally here. Destiny's third and final episode, which will be wrapping up the Light and Darkness saga. And this is it. Heresy is the last major release until Frontiers launches later this year. We don't really know if we're going to get some sort of like Into the Light adjacent update. There's some speculation that Pantheon is going to be making a return. But as most of you know, arguably the most important season is the one that's going to be the ramp-up season into the final expansion. Heresy is an extremely important episode, which brings us to the 15 biggest changes coming with this episode. So without further ado, let's begin. First big change is actually our story and content delivery. Heresy will see us going back into the Dreadnought, which has not been explored since the Taken King days back inside of Destiny 1. Here, we're going to be chasing down the third Echo aboard the Dreadnought, dealing with the Hive, the Taken, and the Dread. Now, it was also said in Bungie's developer livestream that a certain Dread in particular is who we're after. And in some of the art that was shared in the most recent TWAB, you can actually see a subjugator that does look half taken. Now, I'm not really sure who the main antagonist of Heresy is going to be. We've heard Bungie refer to the Hive Pantheon multiple times. We've seen Xivu Arath out there. Oryx was literally confirmed by Bungie during the live stream that he will be making a return in some form. Not really sure what that is, but we do know that the Echo is at the center of all of this. On top of that, we'll be working with Eris Morn again, Drifter, as well as Sloan, with Sloan being part of an event that kicks off early in the episode, where we're literally going to learn about her Taken power. Now, I don't know if we're going to get the ability ourselves to take enemies, and for my people not familiar with what that may entail, it's literally taking an enemy and making them your ally. Not to be confused with necromancy. Oryx may be a deadbeat dad, but my man draws the line at necromancy. Overall, I will say I am pretty optimistic about the story, and I hope it's going to be good because Revenant and Echoes had its moments, but neither really wowed any of us. If there's one area Bungie has performed well in the past, it's Hive-related expansions. At the same time, I would be extremely surprised if this episode is actually going to wrap up the storyline surrounding Xivu Arath. I think she's just too big to not be an annual baddie. Now, the topic of story and content for Heresy, I also want to remind everyone that we are returning to weekly story time gating within Heresy. Bungie tried the no time gating thing from episode Revenant. Some folks liked it. I personally was a fan of it, but I will say that there were big gaps between the acts. And I think a huge reason why Bungie is doing this is because, well, player numbers really dipped off. Having week-to-week story beats for people to log in kept the player numbers looking a little bit better. Revenant showcased the lowest player numbers in Destiny since Curse of Osiris. What I will say, the whole running between vendors and holo projectors, the rinse and repeat week to week, that gets stale no matter what the rollout of content is, whether it's week to week or all at once. Bungie does say that this time around, they're going to be attempting to strike a balance between dropping everything all at once, but giving us also meaningful reasons to log in, which means the majority of the activity content is set to be available on the first day of an act, with the content evolving based on the story, which will still continue to roll out weekly. There's also some like new tech they're working on in regards to like talking to different characters versus the same holo projector. Not really sure what that means. I think Bungie's hope is that between the weekly seasonal challenges that reward a new tier of seasonal weaponry, those being those Adepts seasonal weapons, they're hoping to keep people hanging on week to week. Now, change number 2. We've got the Nether Activity. This is our new activity for Heresy Act 1. Now, if you watch the live stream, you'll see that the Nether is very much inspired from previous activities like the Coil, the Shattered Realm. It's also like a splash of Contest of Elders in there with the negative modifiers. This is going to be a 3-player activity taking place on the Dreadnoughts patrol zones and features 3 different zones referred to as bubbles that you can progress through during the activity. Now, these bubbles are said to be randomized and varied with different encounters and objectives to engage with as you explore. Now, probably the most interesting part of this activity is the unique modifiers and upgrades through the boon system. First up, in terms of modifiers, players will not generate health in this activity, which is huge. Now, to compensate for this, players will have 300 health and 75 extra shield. Ammo is also going to be scarce, which limits the amount of special and heavy ammo available, as well as res tokens for your team. Bungie is looking to treat this as a roguelite experience, with your health, ammo, and res tokens being a resource that we're all going to have to manage. Now, there will be ways to acquire health, ammo, and res tokens throughout the Nether, from pots that you can destroy, just like the Coil, as well as chests that you can open up. And their idea behind this is to encourage exploration, not just because you want to, but also out of a means of necessity. Now, our upgrade system takes the form of boons that you can collect via exploration exploration by defeating certain enemies and clearing objectives. Now, there are currently 3 types of boons. You've got your minor, major, and corrupted boons. Minor boons will provide minor stat increases that incrementally increase your power and can stack up to 10. Some of the examples Bungie gave us was things like increasing light or darkness damage, increases the chance of healing orbs to spawn. Again, they're minor things, but that's why they're called minor boons. The next one we have is major boons. These affect your gameplay. Things like Blazing Slide, where sliding lets out a solar wave, similar to what we have on the Pale Hearts. There's also going to be a stasis variant of this. We also got to see one which gives you bolt charge stacks while sprinting. Another where finishers grant a void grenade, which makes targets volatile. But this takes us to our third type, corrupted boons. These are your more powerful upgrades, but they have a downside to them. An example of one was one that increased elemental damage dealt, but it also drains grenade and class abilities. They also mentioned a glass cannon type boon, which massively increases all damage, but it also increases the amount of damage that you take. Now, as for these major and corrupted boons, they mentioned that you're going to be limited to 5 to 6 per run. All in all, the activity does look neat, and it definitely looks like Bungie is playtesting what's to come in Frontiers. This is definitely not something they're introducing to us to just rinse things out at the end of the episode. The fact that we're going to have to be managing our health as a resource, our ammo, and our res tokens, this could become the norm for the future of Destiny content. One of the more interesting aspects is the 3 different modes that will be available to us. One being more for exploration, where Bungie said it's going to be easier to stay alive in this one. There's going to be a standard difficulty mode and also an expert level version. All of which, by the way, have random drop zones, meaning when you load in, you will be randomly placed on the map, which is way different than our current system is in the game. Change number 3. Fellas, we got a new dungeon. And with the new dungeon, we have a dungeon race. Sundering Doctrine is going to be launching this Friday, February the 7th at Reset. It will have contest mode enabled for 48 hours. And this one is going to be taking place in Savathun's throne world inside of Rolk's pyramid ship. Now, I know my lore folks are going crazy over this one. This pyramid ship is wild. This was the first chapter when it came to opening up our minds and world way beyond what we thought was out there. And what Rolk's ship really established was the hierarchy of the bad guys. At least for me. For the longest time, we thought the worm gods were the baddest of the bad. Then we literally see what Rolk did to Zeta. Good God. Now, interestingly enough, there's also an emblem called Trigonic Amber, which you could simply get by watching the dungeon race. And it looks very similar to the pyramid on Mercury. And for my folks saying, Cross, you're full of copium right now, look at it. How can you not see Mercury in the pyramid ship? Now, for my folks that don't want to be clearing this dungeon on contest mode, fret not. The team that finishes first on contest mode will be rewarded the day 1 trophy, and simultaneously, normal mode for the dungeon will then be released. Now, if you're looking to enter this dungeon, you need to be at least 1995 power, and you need to have the final shape dungeon key, and also acquire the Drowning Labyrinth quest in order to enter. It's going to be a fun time, guys. Come join us. The squad and I are going to be tackling the day 1 dungeon, which let me just say was pretty challenging. Like, Vespers was way more challenging than I expected. We were up for 24 hours. This one taking us back to Rolk's ship. Fellas, we might have another 40-hour stream coming, so come join us. Change number 4. Weapons, seasonal adepts, new mods. Fellas, the loot is getting kind of crazy. As shown in the stream here recently, Bungie is going to be putting a huge emphasis on our seasonal loot. The 2 weapons we got a preview of were Adamantite, which is a strand support frame auto rifle, which will behave pretty similar to No Hesitation, but this weapon being strand allows it to spawn unraveling projectiles on your ally that you're healing. Don't worry, you're not going to kill them. It's just going to be able to do icky stuff to the enemies around them. We also got to see Psycho Pop, which is an aerial denial frame grenade launcher, which is already in such a good archetype, but fellas, this one looks so good. Look at the arcing above the ground when you fire it. We got to see some clips of the arc machine gun being used, which is called a Watchful Eye. And then from Bungie's key art, we got to see a heavy sword, a fusion rifle. Pretty sure during the stream we caught icons for a pulse rifle and a linear fusion rifle. But one of the biggest changes, though, that is coming to our seasonal weapons is the fact that true shiny variants are back. Not only do they have a different look to them, but they're also going to be adept, meaning they can utilize adept mods. They'll have perks in columns 3 and columns 4. They'll have a second origin trait, that being Runneth Over from King's Fall. And it looks like we're going to be able to earn these shiny variants through higher difficulty versions of the Nether Activity. But there's also supposed to be a weekly seasonal challenge that you can complete to earn one as well. Now, another reason you'll want to consider these new seasonal weapons is because they'll have access to a new exclusive tier of weapon mods called Fragile Mods. Now, we only have one announced so far, although there's going to be one more for Act 1 and new mods added from from additional acts. These are supposed to be incredible mods that only stay in rotation for a given season. The first one we saw is called Power of Resolve. It reads that rapid hits with this weapon creates a Taken Seeker projectile, strong against unstoppable champions. You can imagine how crazy something like this can get. You essentially have the ability to apply it to any of these weapons that are a seasonal weapon, have the ability to spawn in whatever these Taken Seeker projectiles are, and stun unstoppable champions. No lie, guys, this honestly takes seasonal loot to a whole nother level, and I was not expecting Bungie to give us not only a shiny variant of these weapons, but also an Adepts shiny variant, which makes me wonder what the grind process for these weapons are going to be. We'll be finding the cheese, fellas, and of course finding the best ways to farm all of these. Now, if you're not into getting any of these, Season of Arrivals gear is making a return. False Promises, Cold Denial, Whispering Slab, Hall of Words, and Temptation Hook will be coming back to us with new roles and origin traits. Additionally, these weapons will not be time gated through Acts 2 and 3, meaning they will be dropping on day 1. Big change number 5. Tome of Want. This is going to be replacing our tonic system this episode. Now listen, I don't know if this is actually going to be a better system than the tonic system. I will say one of the things that hindered the tonic system was that it was bugged, at least for a little while. The Tome of Want is going to give us the option to focus specific weapons, armor, or currencies, in addition to the normal loot drops that are earned from gameplay. We're actually going to be able to earn a currency called Essence of Desire by completing Heresy activities, which will power up our tome's ritual and scriptures to specify the desired rewards. Now, there's even going to be a tooltip in our inventory that displays a progress bar indicating when you'll earn your next specific reward, which is huge considering that Revenant was just a guessing game on when or if you're actually going to get the weapon that you were trying to focus. Progress for this meter will be gained by defeating powerful enemies and by completing Heresy activities, but you can also earn minor gains by completing other various activities across the game, which is great for when you want to go play PvP, Gambit, Nightfalls, etc. Bungie also said that as we go deeper into Heresy, we'll be able to upgrade the tome to be more efficient and increases the number of rewards that can be earned. In addition, tome engravings will also unlock over time, which are going to be these things that provide boosts to our artifact mods. So think like boosts in our previous seasons. They'll also be activated anytime a ritual is active within the tome when you're focusing on weapon or armor, so that you don't need to manage 2 different potions like you did in Revenant. Overall, the system does sound better and simpler. The main takeaway is it going to be bugged? Hopefully not. I will say if there is one thing I did enjoy about the tonic system was the ability to focus for things like glimmer, alloys, and other materials. I utilized the hell out of that. So hopefully Tome of Want will have the ability to focus those materials as well. Change number 6. This one is arguably one of the biggest changes, and that of course is our new abilities as well as our ability changes coming with this new sandbox updates. First up, we're going to be receiving a brand new arc verb called Bolt Charge. You've probably heard us talk about it a few times. This essentially is going to be the arc equivalent of an ignition. Now this is going to be a stacking buff that you'll build up over time, and then once you reach maximum stacks, your next ability will let out a bolt of arc lightning. Now you're going to need to get the ball rolling to obtain a stack of Bolt Charge, which can be done from various methods including exotics, weapon perks, aspects, fragments, as well as artifact mods that we have that heavily lean into this. Then, while you have 1 or more stacks, dealing damage with any weapon will increase your Bolt Charge stack count up to a max of 10. Additionally, each stack that you gain will also give you a chunk of melee energy. Now, along with the addition of Bolt Charge, we have several buffs and tweaks to our existing arc subclasses. On Hunter, Tempest Strike will now grant a stack of Bolt Charge when killing any jolted target. On top of that, it's receiving a very significant damage increase of 57%. Disorienting Blow will now grant a moderate amount of Bolt Charge stacks when dealing damage with the melee. Arc Staff will now grant a stack of Bolt Charge when reflecting attacks. Ascension now has 3 fragment shots on Arc and will also be able to activate abilities like Gambler's Dodge, Marksman's Dodge, Empowering Dodge, and Threaded Spectre. For Striker Titans, Juggernaut, when active, now has a 60% splash damage resistance in PvE and 10% in PvP. It also gains 10% damage resistance versus PvE combatants when active, and when the Juggernaut shield blocks damage, players are now granted a stack of Bolt Charge. Ballistic Slam is getting a huge buff, receiving a 30% increase in damage against PvE combatants, with the damage now scaling based on the distance traveled. Literally, the higher you go, the better. Additionally, each enemy damaged by ballistic will grant a stack of Bolt Charge. For Stormcallers, Storm Trance is getting a 20% damage buff against non-champion enemies, as well as Chaos Reach receiving a 15% buff against non-champion enemies as well. Lightning Surge is seeing Amplify be removed on cast, but it will now grant a stack of Bolt Charge for each enemy hit, and it's having its PvE damage increase by a whopping 30%. Now for our general arc changes across the board, Amplify will now grant us 15% damage resist in PvE, and combatants in PvE will be less accurate against you. For fragments like Spark of Discharge, Momentum, Frequency, Volts, and Ions, they have all received additional effects leaning into our new Bolt Charge keyword. Along with that, we have Fast of Hope, Fast of Purpose, and Fast of Sacrifice, all having Bolt Charge added as well. Now, there's a few other notable subclass changes happening, such as Consecration seeing a 55% reduction in Scorch Wave and Slam Wave damage in PvE. RIP Titans. Radiant is seeing its bonus damage reduced from 25 to 20% in PvE, but while the Radiance's damage bonus will remain unchanged. Frost Armor damage resist per stack is being upped from 4.5 to 6.25% in PvE, meaning that max stacks goes from 36% to 50% damage resist. Handheld Supernova and Voidwalkers receiving a buff, with the projectile count going from 5 to 9, increasing the height and width of the blast, and a slight decrease in projectile damage in PvP from 20 to 15 to account for those additional projectiles. The Unbreakable aspect on Titan is seeing a buff. They've increased the rate that the Unbreakable throw attack charges up when blocking damage. The max damage dealt is being increased by 20%, and the health pool of the shield is being increased as well, with the Void Overshield charge rate also being increased. A throw now costs half a grenade energy charge instead of a full charge, giving you access to it more often. And then while Sentinel Shield is equipped, Orb Power cooldown is being increased from 1 second to 4.5 seconds. Another change is that Ward of Dawn Super now does a weaken pulse when the ward is created. By the way, guys, this doesn't cover anywhere even close to half of the sandbox changes, but these are some of the ability changes that are coming, which means we have a lot of pre and post testing this week. Change number 7. Fellas, we're getting new aspects. We have 3 new light subclass aspects that are being added in the launch of Heresy. 2 of these are going to be leaning into Bolt Charge and be present on Arc subclasses. The other one is going to be leaning into Invisibility and present on the Hunter class. First up for my Titans, we're getting the Storm's Keep. Cast your class ability to grant a moderate number of Bolt Charge stacks to you and nearby allies. While behind your barricade, you and allies gain stacks of Bolt Charge over time, and any weapon damage will discharge max stacks of Bolt Charge. Hot damn it, fellas, we're actually going to be useful again with our rally barricades. We actually got to see gameplay of this provided by Bungie. You get 4 stacks instantly upon casting your barricade, and then within a matter of like seconds, you'll be at 10 stacks of Bolt Charge. And unlike normal Bolt Charge, which requires an ability attack to activate, Storm's Keep allows you to activate it just by dealing weapon damage, which is pretty nice. Now, it was also mentioned that it works when casting Thruster, but of course, you're not going to be getting additional Bolt Charge stacks since there will be no barricade to stand behind. Again, Bungie's doing all they can to get Titans to start using barricades more though, with the aggro effect that it has. Now we have the Bolt Charge ability. No lie, I'm going to be using it day 1 for the dungeon. Now, next up, we have Ionic Sentry for Stormcallers. Defeat targets with arc abilities or weapons to charge up an Ionic Sentry. Activate Grenade, which will deploy a powerful arc turret which blinds on impact and sends out bolts of lightning that chain to nearby enemies and grants stacks of Bolt Charge when it defeats enemies. Now, let me just say, this is already going to be strong considering it can blind enemies and grant stacks of Bolt Charge. Disregard the damage that it's doing. Just the utility alone is enough. And for my folks saying, why would I ever use this over Arc Soul? Fellas, why not just use both? You can literally use both. Warlocks, you make me sick. Then finally, for my Hunters, we have a Void aspect called On the Prowl. And for my Hunters, you may be wondering, why are y'all getting a Void one? Well, y'all did just get an Arc one in the final shape. I don't know. Bungie wants you to go invisible though. Entering invisibility marks a nearby enemy as a priority target for you and your team. Defeating priority targets creates a weakening cloud of smoke that makes you and your allies invisible when you pass through it. When priority targets are defeated, you and nearby allies gain increased weapon reload speed and stability for a short duration, and are granted grenade, melee, and class ability energy. So instead of that one invisible hunter sneaking up on you and killing you inside a PvP with a shotgun, now you're gonna have 4, 5, maybe even 6 people all invisible, killing you, and then going invisible again and killing the next guy. Dude, the gameplay loop of this is pretty straightforward, but it's gonna be potent, man. You're going invisible, you're defeating a marked target, you're getting that increased stat bumps, you're creating a weakening cloud of smoke that affects other nearby targets, you pass through it again to grant yourself and allies invisibility. And I know I'm speaking from a PvP perspective, but inside of PvE, with things like Omnioculus, this is gonna be nuts. And in game modes like the Nether, where health is such a huge resource, you know the one good thing that counters all damage being taken? Invisibility. No lie, my Hunter mains out there think they got it hard. Dude, you guys literally go invisible anytime things get tough. Change number 8. We are getting some major exotic armor changes. Now, there's actually a lot happening both to our armor and our weapons. We're just gonna cover armor right now, and I'm mainly just gonna touch up on the important ones. Keep in mind, the Sandbox patch notes when they roll out Tuesday are gonna be way thicker with way more stuff. These are just the bullet points. Let's start with the Titan Exotic Insurmountable Skull. Skull Fort. This will now grant energy to arc melee abilities when hitting targets with any melee attacks, with the amount generated varying based on the melee use. This essentially is going to increase the viability of the exotic, since you won't only need to rely on melee final blows. Considering that Ballistic Slam is getting a buff, I think you see where I'm going with this. Khepri's Horn will now send out 3 waves of flame instead of just 1, although they will no longer return back toward the barricade. Additionally, the tracking on the waves has been enhanced, and the combatants that are damaged by these waves are now enveloped in a sunspot, as well as players if they are defeated. Now, this will now require a solar super to be equipped, and the Spirit of the Horn on our Stoicism class item will also be inheriting these changes. Now, interestingly enough, if you're rocking thrusters with Spirit of the Horn, you're actually going to get like this X pattern from your solar waves. I'm not sure if that's like a good thing or a bad thing. I don't even know. Part of me wonders, can you like run into a group of enemies and then thrust and then boom, everything dies? I don't know. Ursa Furiosa is also being updated along with the changes to Unbreakable. Blocking damage with Unbreakable will now return grenade energy instead of super energy. Moving over to our Hunters, Radiant Dance Machines is receiving a rework. Multi-kills with primary ammo weapons will refund dodge energy. When dodge energy is full, multi-kills will grant extra charges, with powerful commands and guardians counting as more than 1. It's also going to improve airborne effectiveness and hipfire mobility, range, and accuracy for primary ammo weapons. Essentially, what this means is that you can't just dodge a bunch of times in a row, and instead you're going to need multi-kills. However, these dodges will now count as real dodges, and they will trigger different perks and aspects. Foe Tracer is seeing its bonus weapon damage duration increase from 10 seconds to 15 seconds, which is a much needed buff. Gwizin's Vest now progresses its super return on super hits as well as kills before becoming invisible. They've also improved the maximum possible super energy gains per return, and it now also emits a cloud of weakening smoke when you exit invisibility, which actually works great both in its neutral state and in the super. Keep that in mind, guys. You don't even have to be in the super for that one. At the same time, who the hell is rocking Spectral Blades? Somebody might. It's a void season. Now, for a bit of the nerfs, Spirit of Galanor is receiving a nerf with a maximum amount of energy that can be refunded, for Silk Strike and Golden Gun being reduced from 50% down to 30%. For my Warlocks, Geomax Stabilizers is receiving a new addition to its perk where sprinting while near max bolt charge stacks will top it off, starting at 6 bolt charges. On top of that, they've also increased the super energy granted from Onyx Traces from 2% to 7%, which is huge. For Storm Dancer's Brace, they've doubled the damage benefit per stack of Ascendant Amplitude, now 20% per stack, and the cost of Onyx Blink during super has been reduced by 50%, and they've also reduced the maximum amount of energy refunded to 30%, down from 50%. Now for Seeking Filaments, it now gives class ability energy per kill while Devour is active, which will give it a more satisfying gameplay loop. And then finally, Verity's Brow is receiving the meter system that decays backwards through tiers rather than falling off completely, similar to Wormgod's Caress. Times 1 will last the longest at 8 seconds, with each tier losing out 1 second until you reach times 5, which will last for 4 seconds. Which again, when one tier's duration elapses, the buff will go down to the next tier. On top of that, the bonus grenade recharge per tier has been changed, with times 1 granting 0.5 times percent per second up to 2.5% per second at times 5. Pretty thick exotic armor changes, guys. Yes, we'll be build crafting like crazy. And for my folks that are interested in our build battle series, to the first winner this season, yes, we will be giving away a PC from our dear friends over at Starforge. Now moving on to change number 9, exotic weapons. Fellas, if the exotic armor changes didn't get you fully chubbed, well, prepare thyself. We've got a host of exotic weapons that are about to be hella buffed. First on the list, we have Delicate Tomb. This one is seeing a massive glow up with Heresy. The chance to create an Onyx Trace on minor combatants has been increased from 4% to 10%. The PV damage bonus on its Tempest Cascade shot is also being increased from 30% to a whopping 100%. On top of that, there's no longer a timer on this, and it will last until your shots are fired. Darcy is also getting a big buff, and it is essentially going to be the sniper equivalent of Gjallarhorn. It's receiving a new intrinsic perk called Networked Targeting, where hits with personal assistant active grants you and nearby allies improved overall weapon performance and precision damage with non-exotic snipers. Now this is going to stack up to times 5, and Darcy will also get this buff itself. Look, I'm not going to say Darcy is going to be the meta. However, making it a support sniper rifle for other legendary sniper rifles is a huge move I never expected. Telesto and its Harbinger Pulse perk will now only refill Telesto's ammo from reserves, instead of Telesto and your kinetic slot weapon. But this perk will now trigger with any void final blow. Now the requirements has been increased from 2 to 3, but Telesto's final blows will count as double. Now for the big one, Telesto's Catalyst is getting a new perk called Harbinger Seether, where after 3 activations of Harbinger's Pulse, you can then special reload the weapon, which would then cause cause a rain of Telesto projectiles on your next direct hit. Hopefully this won't get disabled before the day 1 dungeon. Queenbreaker's bow is receiving a long-awaited change to where you can now swap between its scopes by special reloading. And again, this goes between marksman and combat sights. Now, marksman sights retains the previous behavior, which fires a single shot that chains the nearby enemies and blinds them, with the range being increased from 8 meters to 10 meters. The combat sights, though, is getting a complete rework. It will now change to a 3-round burst linear with a charge time starting at 533, but with sustained damage on a target, it will decrease that charge time down to 300 with no loss to damage. Our next set of exotic weapons are our exotic glaives that are seeing subclass perks added to them intrinsically. Edge of Concurrence will now have jolting feedback, Edge of Action gets destabilizing rounds, Edge of Intent will be receiving incandescent. Additionally, the special shot is no longer tied to glaive energy and instead needs just 6 hits to activate, whether that's shots fired from the glaive or from the melee hits. Dead Messenger, Hardlight, Borealis, all 3 of those weapons are receiving a change to their perk, the Fundamentals. This no longer grants different stats based on the weapon's current element, but instead will provide a 30% damage buff for 10 seconds, or a 10% damage buff inside of PvP, when you apply or receive an elemental keyword that matches the current selected damage type. Fellas, that's pretty huge. Take Gerfalcons, for instance. You're rocking a hard light. You swap the void. You proc Gerfalcons, you get volatile flowing, and now you're gonna give yourself a free 30% damage buff? Hot damn. Now, for the last few weapons I want to mention, Warcliffe Coil will now grant a stack of bolt charge to all nearby allies for every 2 rockets fired. Cloud Strike will now grant bolt charge stacks from both its Stormbringer and Mortal Polarity perks, as well as for Thunderlord. Rain Havoc will grant bolt charges from those lightning strikes. Big changes, guys. But this brings us to change number 10. Weapon Sandbox Changes. Scout Rifles are receiving a 15% damage increase against minor enemies and a 30% damage increase against majors. Auto Rifles are getting a 10% buff against minors and majors, and SMGs are receiving a 5% increase against minors. Trace Rifles are getting a 20% increase against minors, which is huge considering that we literally have the seasonal weapon being a primary trace rifle. And then the big one, Linear Fusion Rifles are receiving a 10% increase against all combatant types. I got so many comments the other day on our damage test video saying no one's going to be using Linear Fusion Rifles. Brother, with the combination of particle reconstruction and the 10% buff we're getting here, oh, we're going to be in a fusion rifle, Linear Fusion Rifle meta. Watch it happen. Glaives are receiving a significant improvement to their aim assist, their aim magnetism, damage fall off. Glaive projectile hit registration is also being improved. Stats are being increased for things like handling, its mag size, its projectile speed, and reload speed. But arguably the biggest change for glaives, and this hits all of them, is that the final hit of a melee combo is going to be dealing double damage and inflict more flinch on PvE enemies. Aggressive frame fusion rifles are seeing a change after Coriolis Force was literally forgotten for 4+ years. If you don't even know what weapon I'm talking about, you're completely fine. Most people don't. However, they're now going to fire 3 bursts of 4 pellets in increasingly wide spreads. The minimum damage when fully outside damage fall off is being increased from 45% to 65%, along with range fall off start being increased by 4 meters and a range fall off in being increased by 3 meters. And then finally, a 15% damage increase versus minors and major combatants in a signed contract that I will personally lick DMG's ass if Coriolis Force or any aggressive frame fusion rifle actually becomes meta inside of PvP. It ain't ever happening. Support frame auto rifles are also seeing a rework to their range stat, which will now increase how far you can heal another guardian, which is just in time for our new support auto frame. Then lastly, rocket assisted sidearms are seeing their lone suspected nerf to damage. PV and detonation damage is being reduced by 45%, with impact damage being increased by 100%. And according to Mossy Max, this is roughly going to be a 15% decrease in damage. Aim assist fall off and its maximum distance, along with magnetism fall off, is being reduced by 8 meters. And the damage against bosses, vehicles, and mini bosses is being reduced by 30%. Now, something interesting to note though is that Buried Bloodline and its body shot damage is unaffected by this 30% increase. And in fact, its critical hit damage is being buffed by 8%. So Buried Bloodline is getting better. And considering it's a void weapon, there's a reason why we put it on our top weapons to be using in Heresy. It's gonna be potent, fellas. Change number 11. Guys, we got a hell of a lineup of artifact mods, and they are looking arguably the strongest we have ever seen. 4 out of the 5 anti-champion capability mods are for special and heavy weapons. And really, it's all 5, considering that anti-barrier sidearm, we have rocket assisted sidearms, which are special weapons. So this is a hell of a lineup. They've also added a new keyword called exhaust, which reads that exhausted targets will deal reduced outgoing damage. And yes, you could double stack this with Sever. Overload machine guns will also be able to intrinsically exhaust targets. targets. Any weapons that have the Psycho Hack or the Subjugation Origin traits will also be able to do that. And then the rest of the artifact is just chocked full of things that synergize with Arc, Void, and Strand. In Column 2, we have Volatile Marksman and Volatile Rounds, which will grant volatile rounds on Rapid Void Weapon precision hits and Rapid Void Weapon final blows. Legend Incarnate is going to straight up give our Vault of Glass weapons bonus damage and make them overcharge, since they're going to have the new Time Lost Magazine Origin trait, with those weapons being reissued to us. Unraveling Orbs is making a return, which will allow our Strand weapons to obtain unraveling rounds when we pick up orbs or tangles. In Column 3, we have Hold the Line, where machine guns and glaives gain increased reload speed and stability when surrounded, but more importantly, they heal you. You've got King's Vestige, you got Dielectric, you got Disruptor Spike, Horde Shuttle, Flashover. Fellas, the list goes on, but arguably the biggest one here is Particle Reconstruction. Now, we don't really know how big of a damage buff or debuff this may provide. Again, Particle Deconstruction was a debuff, and it states right here that dealing sustained damage with fusion rifles and linear fusion rifles partially refills the magazine from reserves and grants them bonus damage for a short duration against that target. Used to be a 40% increase in damage. I would be very surprised if it comes back and still be 40%, but we'll see. Overall, these artifact mods look stacked, and where Revenant really lacked in that department, Heresy is coming out swinging. Change number 12. We've got new exotics, fellas, and they look sexy. First up, we have the Barrow Dyad, which is a Strand submachine gun that literally does not look like any weapon we've ever had in Destiny. Its intrinsic trait, called Panic Response, reads that the weapon generates blight as it deals damage. While not firing, blight depletes and the magazine is gradually refilled. Reload the weapon to convert stored blight into blinded seekers. Now, for its other trait, we have Taken Divergence, where hitting 3 different targets generates a large amount of blight, and blinded seekers board through the targets. It also reads that this weapon resonates with your choice, and I'm not really sure what that means. Now, it seems to have a pretty interesting gameplay loop of dealing damage to generate blight, with hitting 3 different targets, giving you that large amount, similar to perks like One for All. Then when you reload, you'll convert that blight into blinded seekers, or alternatively, if you don't feel like you've had enough yet, or you just don't want to reload, you just stop shooting, and this would just refill the magazine very quickly. Now, interestingly about this weapon, Bungie has not revealed how to earn it, and considering that they're showing it this early, I don't think this is going to be part of like some Act 3 exotic mission, but perhaps it's a secret related to Act 1. I don't know. We'll see. Now, for our other exotic that was revealed, we have the Lodestar, which is our Season Pass exotic. This is a primary ammo arc trace rifle, and this shoots a beam of arc energy from the hip or in a burst similar to a pulse rifle when you're aiming down sights. Its exotic trait is Starlight Beam, where the weapon fires a low intensity arc beam with enhanced stability and accuracy. Now, for its other exotic trait, we have Arc Alignment, where dealing arc damage from any source aligns the battery's coils. When alignment is completed, reload press to disengage the safety, which will enable a hip-fire Starlight Beam to apply jolts to any target's damage for a short time. Aim down sights to slow the rate at which the battery drains. Now, I know trace rifles aren't in the best state, but Bungie did state they are giving it a 20% buff, which should be hitting this one as well. This one utilizes primary ammo. I'm really hoping it's not going to be weak, fellas. Like, this thing needs to come out swinging, considering how sexy it is. Now, the other exotic that has not been shown to us is going to be the Dungeon exotic, which Bungie has not revealed to us. Now, keep in mind, we are not getting exotic armor pieces. No exotic armor pieces for this episode, just the exotic weapons, as well as the new aspects. This has kind of been a trend now for the past few years, where the final season has launched with no exotic armor pieces. And the same thing applies here to Heresy. Change number 13. Fellas, it's time to run Vault of Glass again. Now, this is going to cover our loot, Vault of Glass, rituals, etc. But the big one here is that Vault of Glass weapons are being reprised and will have new perks. An order tray will also be present and will finally be craftable, making this the final raid active in Destiny 2 that needed updating. The master version of the raid will still have adept drops, of course, with multiple traits per column that can also be enhanced. Now, these Vault of Glass weapons have always been really good. They just got a bit power crept because they were just so old. Fatebringer is a classic hand cannon that has really only been surpassed by Midnight Coup. Found Verdict used to be one of the best shotguns in the game. Corrective Measure is a very good void machine gun, which paired with the artifact mods should be a juicer. Hezen's Vengeance also has some incredible perk combinations, and that origin trait's gonna play so well into it. You got Praeton's Revenge, which is a kinetic rapid-fire sniper rifle, which should pair very nicely with anti-barrier sniper rifle and anyone using Darcy. Now, in terms of rituals, Palindrome is making its long-awaited return, this time as an arc adaptive hand cannon, which I don't know, some people probably wanted it to be a void weapon, but I'm okay with arc. And again, my main thing, as long as it feels as good as it felt before, and in this case better with the origin traits and the different perk combinations, that's all that matters to me. Lotus Eater is also another Nightfall reward. This is a void rocket rocket sidearm, which can roll things like repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds. It's going to be very nice. Vanguard Ops is bringing us a Strand aggressive rocket launcher. Gambit is getting us Backfang, which is an arc rapid fire glaive, which might actually be decent. Crucible is giving us Joxer's longsword. This is a void heavy burst pulse rifle, which yes, can roll repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds. This is going to be extremely good considering how good this archetype is by default. For Iron Banner, Peace Bond is making a return, which is a stasis adaptive burst sidearm, along with Warlord Spear and Arc Trace rifle, both of which should be dropping in the 3rd week of this episode. Now, the topic of loot, Trials of Osiris is getting a huge rework where you no longer have to go flawless in order to get adept loot, which is great because Exalted Truth is making a return, some very good PvP combinations, as well as some great Void PvE combinations. Keen Thistle is going to be the new Trials weapon. This is a solar aggressive sniper rifle with some solid PvP and PvE options, although keep in mind this archetype is really not that desirable inside of PvE. Additionally, the Inquisitor, which is an arc slug shotgun, will be making its return later on in Heresy. And then moving over to our competitive playlist, our new reward, Regis's stock, is a stasis pulse rifle and a PR-55 one at that. The only other weapon in the game within that archetype is the BXR Battler. This thing looks absolutely juice with perk combinations like Lone Wolf and Zim Moments, along with Sword Logic, Desperado, Headseeker, Kill Clip. For my PvE players, you got Demolitionist and Headstone with the Rhyme Stiller as well. All around, loot is looking pretty hot. Now moving on to change number 14. This one is going to revolve around Trials, and I know we just briefly talked about it, but I cannot understate how big of a change this actually is. Guys, for the first time ever, Trials is not going to be a flawless or bust system, meaning in order to get to the Lighthouse, you don't have to get 7 wins and no losses. The number of passages available has been reduced to only 2. First is the Lighthouse passage, and this passage utilizes open skill matchmaking, and all you need to do in this is just win 7 games and you'll earn entrance to the Lighthouse. So if you win 7 games but lose 100 games, that's fine. Now there's going to be 2 sets of rewards, one being repeatable rewards that you'll get every time you visit the Lighthouse and open the chest, as well as weekly win streak rewards, so essentially how many games you win in a row from 1 to 7. Now repeatable rewards include prisms, base Trials weapons, Trials armor, Assyrian ciphers, ascended shards, and a chance at an adept Trials weapon. And the chance for the adept here is based on your longest weekly win streak, with 3 or more wins guaranteeing an adept. They actually broke down the percentages with wins while in a trio fire team, 1 win being a 15% chance, 7 wins being a 100% chance. TLDR on this, guys, is that getting to the Lighthouse is going to be something everyone can do, and you don't have to be flawless. You just got to get a win. Bungie's also making a number of different changes to game modes within Destiny's PvP, primarily for Trials. They're also giving us a host of new drip and some sexy emblems for hitting Ascendant rank inside of comp. Bungie really wants people to try out PvP in Destiny, and for the first time in a long time, I actually feel like new players are going to give Trials of Osiris a go. Now, change number 15 and our final change here, and I'm only throwing this on the list because honestly, you guys seem more hyped about this than anything else in the reveal stream. Destiny is having a collaboration with the launch of Heresy with none other than Star Wars. That's right, fellas. You want to run around and be a stormtrooper or an Imperial Royal Guard, or have the elite Death Trooper armor set, or rock that Death Star Ghost Shell, now is your time. So that's it, fellas. Those are our top 15 changes coming with Heresy. Let me know in the comments below what you think. We'll be streaming every day this week. This one's going to be a grinding one. We'll be prepping for the day 1 dungeon. I'll be doing damage tests as well. That way we can see what linears are doing, as well as fusion rifles are doing. So just to warn everybody, your sub feed from us is going to be blowing up. If you're interested in taking part in some of the eggplant bets, we have them live over on our Twitch stream. And the giveaway we're going to be doing for the PC, for my build battle winners, are also going to be taking place over there on Twitch as well. So come join us. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.